Do you hear me?
Hi, Gail. Yeah, we can hear you.
That's so good to hear. I'm so sorry.
These things happen.
Yeah. Okay. I believe that we're live, so I can take the roll.
Yes.
Right.
So I call to order the August 18th, 2020 board meeting. It is now 6:43 p.m.
Mr. Barron?
Here.
Mr. Kopsky?
Here.
Ms. Harris?
Here.
Mr. Martiri?
Here.
Dr. Jackie Moore?
Here.
And Ms. Sarah D. Spivey.
Here.
Thank you.
Sorry, give me 1 second. I got kicked out of board docs. All right, so we are still virtual. It is still a virtual world. Under Governor Pritzker's executive order, we are able to conduct this meeting remotely, which is what we are doing. Here we go. There we go. Okay. So our first item is visitor comments. Gail, do we have any this evening?
No.
All right. Our next item is approval of the June 16, 2020 Committee of the Whole meeting minutes. I move that they be approved. Is there a second?
Second.
Gail, could you please call the roll?
This can be a voice vote, Sarah.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, the motion carries. And then our first item for the evening is discussion of the River Forest Community Center Husky Pups.
Yes, this item falls under finance, and it's being presented by Mr. Ron Anderson and Mr. Dick Chappelle, who is the Executive Director for the River Forest Community Center. As you know, we have a space sharing agreement with the River Forest Community Center, and since we've been closed due to COVID, the Community Center is requesting the ability to be able to open. I'm going to turn the presentation over. At the conclusion of this presentation, we will be bringing the document back at the August 27th board meeting as one of our next steps, and we'll be asking for approval at that time. This item is in compliance with Strategic Plan Priority 4 and District Policy 1:20 and 8:20. Gentlemen. There's a presentation, I believe. Mr. Anderson? You're muted, Mr. Anderson, so we can't hear you.
Oh, no wonder I was talking to myself that entire time. Okay. Can you scroll down? Okay. The historical perspective, the Husky Pups was here, and you guys had joined agreement in 2008, and I would turn it over to Dick so that he could get more detail about it, because this is before my time. So Dick, can you weigh in on this?
Sure. The community center, as Ron has on his PowerPoint presentation, prior to 2008, the high school ran the Husky Pups child care program, and it was designed to keep students who had given birth in school and ensure they were able to graduate. In 2008, we worked out the cooperative agreement between the community center and the high school, where the community center took over the operation of the child care program. It's located on the north end of the campus at the high school. And then the high school moved the site program, the community integrated transition education program into the community center building. And that's in essence the gist of the space sharing agreement. Subsequently, since 2008, both programs have expanded. Site program has added a Site 2 classroom and also a Site 3. The community center, during the course of the operating the child care program, we have also been able to expand the program too.
Can you scroll to the next slide?
In my previous conversations, again, the whole coronavirus thing has certainly thrown a lot of us for a loop here. And one of the things that we were able to do at our River Forest site, we also have a child care program. And following the state guidelines, we were able to open up our program back in early June. And I think that that's what we have modeled the opening up of the Husky Pup child care program at the high school after. Whether it's been complying with the guidelines that are issued by the state. And we've had success offering it here. My concern is if we're not able to open up at the high school, we typically have 14 or 15 employees that work at the high school. Those folks, quite frankly, will be laid off because we just don't have the enrollment here to be able to just move them over here, nor can we just move the program from the high school into our building because it's a different license that we operate under the high school compared to what we operate at the child care program in River Forest. So as part of this slide, not only would we lose the revenue from our program participants, we would also be reducing our staff, incurring the unemployment costs. The other thing that we have seemingly also missed out on is they had a child care restoration grant, the CCRG. The guideline for that was to be open by August 14th, which we did not make, but that was our original intent. And that is money that's funded. I think it's federal government money that's been channeled through the state for the promotion and the opening of child care programs. And we did qualify for that here. My hope was to be able to open up at the high school in time that we could apply for the grant at the high school. And basically what it does, it helps offset some of the financial loss for child care programs. With the phase 4 reopening, there are limits that the state has imposed on child care programs. Even though your operating capacity is significantly higher, the limits range between 50 and 75% of what your typical or what your enrollment should be able to be. This child care restoration grant was designed to help offset some of that lost revenue.
Next slide.
Right now, we have we've been staying in touch with our program participants during the course of the summer, and we had, prior to the coronavirus, we anticipated we would have 55 to 60 program participants, which is fairly standard for what we've had over the last probably 4 or 5 years. Right now, and in fact, there was a survey that was done at the end of last week, we would have 35 program participants that would start. For those of you that might not know where we're located, we are located on the north end of the campus, adjacent to the Erie Street door. I think that, certainly from a social distancing standpoint, that's probably about the furthest point north you can go on the high school campus, quite honestly. What we anticipated that we would do, and it's consistent with what we did over here at the River Forest site when we opened up, is we would have, and basically it would just be a matter of putting a desk out in the hall, having a check-in for our program participants. The parents would not be going into the classrooms. What would happen is they would just come, They would check their child in. Our staff would then be responsible for taking them back to the classroom. At the end of the day, the reverse would be true. The parents would call, they would notify us that they were, what time their arrival or when they got to the when they got to the entryway or whatever, and then our staff would bring their child out. So in essence, the parents of the participants would not be circulating through the high school. As far as our plan, when we reopened in River Forest, we were required to submit a reopening plan, and I believe that has been forwarded on to the D200 board. It outlines the different procedure. It outlines the limitations. It outlines just about everything that could be anticipated that would happen in the child care program. The Department of Children and Family Services approved our plan for our River Forest site. The site for the high school is modeled it's modeled exactly after the plan that we had approved for the River Forest site. The only thing that we've done is we've added, since we have the infant and the 2-year-old population at the high school, we added the clauses relevant to that particular population group. And everything else, we also submitted this to the Oak Park Health Department since they would have jurisdiction as opposed to either Illinois Department of Public Health or Cook County. And we got some feedback from Mike Charlie at the health department. We incorporated his suggestions into the plan that has been forwarded on to the board.
And here we recommended that we maintain a good intergovernmental agreement and move this from the CAL to the regular board meeting for approval. Any questions?
I had some, Sarah.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Hi, Ron, thank you. And Dick, thank you as well. I'd sent out some questions yesterday morning, late morning, and I saw the responses that were sent out, but they were related to the public health, more general guidelines, but didn't address the questions I'd asked specifically. So I want to ask them again. And one is for, I guess, our administration, and then the rest would be for Dick. I'll ask the ones for you, Dick, first. And you said that there are 35 to 40 participants in the program. And I wanted to know, as you stated, the program was initially started for teen parents at the high school. And at the last time we talked about this, that had significantly changed from who the consumers of this, of Husky Pups. So I wanted to know the breakdown. How many of these 35, 40 participants are the children of our current D200 families, D90, 97, and how many are not the children of staff of any of those districts?
Ron, I think that was information that I answered in one of those questions yesterday.
It should have been in the link. I'm checking now to make sure, but it should have been, I can pull, Ron, if you want to pull it up.
I haven't pulled it up. You want me to
Okay,
go there?
I didn't see that. Okay.
Okay, so the children of D200 staff is 7. River Forest Community Center 3. The children of D200, District 97 is 6. District 90 is 2. Oak Park residents, staff of D90 and D97 is 11. River Forest residents of District 90, 97, or 200 is 1. Children of residents of the neighborhood and communities, 5.
So if that is possible to be sent to us even now, I would appreciate it, just to get, I'm still struggling with how we're looking at Husky Pups in relation to serving its purpose even as part of the IGA. So that's one concern that I have. And then the question I guess I have for our administration, two questions. One is, as this has been brought forward, how are we reconciling having our building closed to our students and saying that with issues of our concerns about safety given the building, and I'm also thinking now about construction on site as well, and but allowing Husky pups to be in the building. Has there been some determination of the rationale for that from our administration?
Yes, we've evaluated that there's no construction in that area that's going on right now, and there won't be any during the fall. By them being isolated over on another end of the building, and no parents coming in the building, the River Forest Community Center would do a daily cleaning all during the day. Well, during the day to address any health issues.
So, Dr. Pruitt, thank you, Ron. And Dr. Pruitt Adams, what would, given our presentations about our remote learning, could you I know that there will be, I have questions, so I'm sure that there are other community members with questions about how we're opening up the building.
So I'm not quite sure I understand. How will I respond to that? Is that what you're asking?
What is the rationale? Because we have talked about having remote learning for the fall and the variety of reasons given our building and things that had to do with our, having our special ed students as priority in terms of, and, students that needed in-person contact. And we're talking about having this program be in effect, as soon as possible, where we haven't given any dates for our students. And, I am a huge proponent of early childhood and know the need for childcare, but I'm struggling with, as I have with this agreement and how we're moving forward. So I'd appreciate understanding.
I do understand. It was part of our IGA with the center, making sure that they adhere to the guidelines, the portion of the building that they will be within, and not having the parents come into the building. It was really honoring our portion of the agreement. We did discuss the concern over bringing young people in from the community center when we were still trying to get to the point of bringing our own onto site. Once it was presented to us, the concern and the timing, because we did ask, how do you know you're going to have the clientele? And once all of those questions were met, we brought it forward for discussion with the board.
Jackie, do you have more questions?
And I am looking at what was sent to the board. I'm going to forward it to you now. I think the answers, I'm going to send the board the document in response to the questions. I think what the board received was just one piece from IDPH. So I'm going to forward it to the board now so that you have the link to the responses to all the questions that were sent.
No, Sarah, I didn't have other questions, but I still have the lingering discussion that still feels unresolved about whether we were going to continue with the IGA. So I'm unclear. Feels like we skipped a step. So, but those are my questions for now, and I'll wait to look at the responses that were given. Thanks.
Sure. Regarding the IGA, so I'm just trying to think through, Jackie, whether we have skipped a step. Is there a termination date, Jerlyn, on the IGA, or is
Yes.
it just in perpetuity?
We had said unless you come forward, we have to give a notice And so our contract was due to be reviewed again in 2022. And we said that we would come forward to the board in May, which would be the year's notice, May of 2021, with the recommendation to whether continue the program or not.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. All right, Matt, do you have any comments or questions? And we can't hear you if you're talking.
No questions for me at this point. I mean, my understanding, in anyone can echo or correct me, is this is part of a broader agreement. And so, and as far as the distancing that Jackie has mentioned as a concern, it sounds like this is a smaller population, up to 35. And so I guess it's just pretty straightforward mathematical answer as to how this is more manageable than the rest of what we may not be able to do in that building this year. But if there's more to it, I'd love to hear that. But no, I'm okay with what I've heard so far.
Okay, thanks. Gina, do you have any comments or questions?
No.
All right, Tom?
Yeah, I will look at the answers to the questions being sent, but one of the ones I had was, are our students on site now returned at River Forest Community Center?
No, that's a part of the determination of parents identifying and us having the staff to go over there. We're still in that process of negotiation. So in the town hall, we indicated that our goal is to try to have our kids on site after September the 8th, which is right after Labor Day.
So we don't know.
No, not at this point, no.
That's
And
it.
I just sent the link.
Tom, did you have anything else, or do you want me to go on to?
Please go on. I'm done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ralph?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. First, I echo Jackie's concerns. I think that those were well stated, and I appreciated her stating them. And Dick, I love your work, you know that, and I'm a big supporter of early childhood, know its importance. I have a couple of questions. Number one, your experience in the program that you've reopened, have you had any instances of COVID-19 come in after you reopened? That's one of my questions. Number two, I know it's a smaller population, 35 to 40 kids. I question how you keep social distancing with toddlers in the space you're going to be provided at OPRF. I do have some concerns about how that math works out. Three, if there is a breakout of COVID-19 at the population that's attending the high school, and it impacts anyone on our staff, someone contracts the virus, what kind of liability insurance do you have that covers any claims any staff or employee of OPRF High School would have for being exposed to this problem? As you said, Dick, the pandemic changes everything. And when I read through the attachment on some of the procedures you had implemented to try to comport with the different guidelines, there's a lot of responsibility placed on the various parents, and parents are people. And so making sure that like a kid's blanket is always fresh and clean and has been washed the night before, their blanket that they bring in for napping on, I question whether that's going to happen just because people are people 100% of the time. Folks get busy, folks get tired. So I'm concerned that a lot of the responsibility that is placed on the parents will have episodic failures just because people are people. So those were some of my questions, but I do want to say I echo Jackie's, and I really think if we're going to open our building to these students before we've opened it with a specific date for our special education students, we need to have a really good reason why we haven't opened our building to our special education students. And I just think that does bother me at a level. And I completely appreciate Dr. Moore bringing it up, and I'll stop here.
So I heard 3 questions in there. I don't know who wants to take those.
Which, you know what, I know if you can repeat the questions, I think some of them I may be able to answer just from the community center standpoint. I think one of them was, have we had any cases at the community center? We have not. We did have one staff member who tested positive, and he did a self-quarantine, and we did talk with the Illinois Department of Public Health, and we did not have to shut down our program because it was not defined as close distancing. And that's part of the things that we do in our program, as far as whether it was the interaction with the staff or the participants. Our staff are very, very conscientious about making sure that the kids stay apart. So that was one of the questions. I'm not sure that I remember the other 2 questions, Ralph. If they could be repeated, and if they were applicable to the community center, I'll certainly try and answer those.
Part of his question was tied to the response, your liability insurance, I think, tied to should someone catch COVID on site. And then the other question I believe he asked was tied to just the onus on parents and making sure that they adequately clean and take care of the blankets and things like that. Did I capture that, Mr. Mortieri?
As always, Dr. Pruitt-Adams, you are spot on.
Thank you. I was trying to listen.
Ideally, because we do have a laundry set up over here at our River Forest site, so we do the wash ourselves here for our students. I know that there was, at one time we had access to the washer and dryer that's in the special ed department, and we were using that as part of our program. Ideally, if that's available, then we would take on that responsibility. So that would eliminate the parents or the potential likelihood that a parent may or may not do the laundry and bring it back clean the next day. If that's an option, we would have our staff take that on as we used to do prior to some of the change. And I don't know if that was in last year or maybe a year and a half ago, but I think there was a logistical challenge for us being able to use the washer and dryer in the special ed department. As far as the liability, I'm not an attorney, Ralph, so I don't know. I mean, I know that the community center and the Oak Park River Forest High School D200 have each other named as additional insureds on each other's policies. But again, I'm not an attorney to say where it would be applicable or where there would be liability, or I don't know that I would be qualified to answer that question.
Ralph, did you have any follow-up?
Nope. I mean, I think these are just questions I have, and I have the same questions Dr. Moore raised. So, I'm pretty concerned about this situation in this environment.
Craig?
Thanks, Sarah. I share Ralph's and Jackie's same concerns around around the inconsistency that we're creating. I understand how that's managed because this is a smaller group, but I think that's an issue for me, just in terms of how it will be perceived by our parents, and why, what our focus is. But a couple quick questions. One, just for my own, just for clarity, the program itself is run by the River Forest Community Center, and effectively is the IGA an IGA to help run the program, or is it an IGA just to provide you space?
It's an IGA for space utilization and for them to use our facility for the child care program and for us to use theirs for the site program.
Okay. And the second question, whether you can answer or not, what is the rough percentage of childcare programs across Oak Park and River Forest that are open?
That I don't know. Dick, do you have an idea?
I honestly don't know that either.
Okay.
I know Hepzibah is open in that capacity. I know the Park District is doing childcare. I only know those from the meetings that I am in.
Okay, thank you.
We could probably get an answer, the Collaboration for Early Childhood,
Yes.
that information.
Yeah, I mean, it would just give me some idea of, where we are on the risk spectrum relative to what's happening across the community, as well as, what other opportunities if we don't open, what's it look like for the 35 people who are looking for childcare that are associated with our district or District 90 or 97.
Thank you, Craig. I think I called on Gina. Did I call on you? You had no questions, right? Okay. So I'm concerned about the insurance liability. I think that's a foundational question. Mr. Chappelle, are you having parents sign waivers, or how are you protecting yourselves from liability against claims of community spread due to your program?
All of our program participants do sign a waiver. The language that has been recommended by the state, by the Department of Children and Family Services and Illinois Department of Public Health is all included in our enrollment packet.
And that's specific to the COVID-19?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I don't have anything to add other than what my colleagues have stated. I share some of those same concerns. But does anybody else want to make any comments before we move from this item? Okay, thank you.
Sarah, it's Gina, I just want to add one thing. I would echo all the comments made, of course. That's why I didn't have any questions, but there's something is calling me to say the fact that there's an aspect of this that has to do with community and the support of our community for our building, and looking at the numbers of number of people in the community that utilize the daycare, the child care facility. It's just, there's a piece of understanding that I'm needing to have about how this would impact not only the staff, right, that there may still be staff who have children enrolled who are needing childcare because they can't actually manage kids and teach at the same time when you have small ones. There's just an aspect of how this fits into the community and what this partnership means on a larger scale that I'm curious about. It's not necessarily a question, it's just a thought that's occurring to me.
Thank
And the
you.
board should have the responses that I sent.
And I will say that that is one of the struggles that I have is that understanding and appreciating the need for supporting and being a resource of that type in our community, and having that, struggle of wearing the hat of a board member. And this is a longer, this goes back for me because I have been trying to understand this, how we have implemented this IGA and how it's kind of rolled over from year to year, and the purposes of it and the have shifted, while the responsibility in terms of our staff, in terms of cleaning and all of those things lies squarely with us. So those are partly concerns. I didn't get in. I had so many more questions that had to do with the ratios and knowing the sizes of those rooms and how you socially distance in those rooms, and our ventilation, and the fact that the Husky Pup, the playground area, is not going to be accessible? So where are these kids going to play? I had all kinds of questions. And it feels as though we're retrofitting a need into a space that is not the appropriate space. So that's the struggle that I'm having.
Mr. Chappelle, do you have any other options? Do you have a plan B if the board does not vote to approve this?
No, we don't, because again, with dealing with DCFS, we just can't pick up and move from one location to the other. And ideally, if there was that possibility, then we would have looked into moving the program over here to the River Forest site. But again, the way the licensing mechanism is set up, that's something that's just not physically possible. So, and if I can also add, unquestionably, it's going to be a huge economic, have a huge economic downside effect on us. The number of participants that we'll be having, I think that we would, quite frankly, be lucky to break even with the 35 participants. However, if we have to, my bigger concern in the scheme of all of this is if we don't open, if we're unable to open, those families most likely, and our experience has been, is once somebody goes to another child care program, they're gone. They're gone. And certainly they're not going to, if the child care were to be, or if the building were to be opened up for the second semester, parents are very unlikely, if they've gotten their child in another child care program, that they're going to uproot them mid-year. The other couple of other components are, one, that we will have to lay off our staff. There's no question about that. We just don't, we won't have the enrollment here to be able to bring them over here and plug them into our program. So that will be a tremendous expense for us as an organization. The other thing, much like the program participants, is that once we lose staff, they're not going to be sitting around waiting on us if it's, whether it's next semester or potentially even next year. You know, they've got bills to pay. They've got other, financial commitments, so they will most likely find another place to work. And for us to get those, get those employees back is probably pretty slim. So it's got a lot of ramifications for us as an organization. Certainly not the least of what is the financial component to that.
Thank you. All right, if nobody has anything else, thank you, Mr. Chappelle, for that information and for the presentation.
Okay. If there are any other questions, as I had mentioned before, I'm juggling a couple other meetings upstairs in our building here. So if it's okay, I will excuse myself. But if there are any questions, please either get them to Dr. Pruitt or to Ron, and then we'll get you the answers. But I appreciate you guys at least considering this and talking about this tonight with me.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
The next item is the first student transportation contract extension, and it's for field and extracurricular trips for the fiscal year 2021. Making this presentation is Ms. Carolyn Gust, Director of Purchasing and Transportation, and Cindy Sedor, Chief Financial Officer. This item is for action in the next session, the next meeting, the meeting on the regular board meeting. At the conclusion of the presentation, it is recommended that the contract extension with First Student for field and extracurricular trips be moved forward to the Board of Education to approve at the August 27th Board of Education meeting. This item is in compliance with Strategic Plan Priority 4 and District Policy 4:60. Ladies.
Thank you, Dr. Pruitt-Adams. Does anyone have any questions? Thank you very much. That was very thorough. So field trips, extracurriculars, this does include athletics, and we do have some groups that are using First Student right now. As the cover memo says, our pricing is staying flat for the per hour. Our per occurrence, our school run conflict fee is going up a little bit from 31 to 40. It's still significantly lower than the $75 that was agreed to in the original contract, which was before my time. At some point in time, their first student billing department started charging us $30 per occurrence. And when they discovered it, it was like 2 years later. So they didn't feel it was proper to up it back to the 75. Next year, I do plan to go out to bid for this, so I'm hoping I can negotiate that 75 down. I was not able to give you a total dollar amount for the contract because of the situation we're living in right now. We don't know what's going to happen, but the extension does cover us if we don't use First Student for any field trips. That's a significant blow to them. That's about $350,000 about. And the extension covers us, so they can't come back to us and ask us to pay a percentage for continuation of service, which seems to be the popular thing for transportation providers right now. I think that was all I had. Were there any questions?
Any questions from anyone?
So Sarah, it's Craig. Just for clarity again, if we sign this, then they won't be able to. There's no minimum associated with this or continuation, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
And Carolyn, you said we're using the services today in today's environment.
Correct.
In what capacity?
The golf team is using it to go for practice, I believe.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you, Ms. Gust.
Thank you.
And our next item is the update of the facilities master plan budget and the 10-year maintenance components.
I'm sorry, I had my mic muted. I am so sorry. I was introducing the item. I apologize. The next item is the update on facilities master plan budget and the 10-year maintenance plan. This item is for discussion. It is being brought forward by Mr. Ronald C. Anderson, Executive Director of Operations, Mr. Fred Pruz, Director of Buildings and Grounds, and Mr. Jeff Bergman, Director of Construction. This item is in compliance with Strategic Plan Priority 4 and District Policy 4:150. And at the conclusion of the presentation, it is recommended that this item be brought forward at the August 27th Board of Education meeting, requesting the approval of an increase of $2 million each year in our capital maintenance budget by increasing it to $6 million a year over versus being $4 million. Gentlemen.
Back again. Okay. To my understanding, this was presented back in the December 2018 board meeting, along with the Project 1, where the Imagine Project 1 was approved. We discussed, well, not we, but it was discussed again at the June CAL meeting and the regular board meeting in June. The board expressed concern and wanted to understand the 10-year maintenance plan on multiple occasions. Even as I joined the team, I've heard that you guys wanted to know more about the 10-year maintenance plan in detail. This presentation will present the detail that was requested, and just a couple items to keep in mind, that the $4 million will limit the ability to do necessary maintenance in a timely fashion. Could you scroll down to the next one? All right, the criteria used to decide what goes in the maintenance plan is the emergency maintenance items, which can't wait. Then you have the items that impact construction work. You also have the items that's done because of opportunities. And an example of the opportunity is if we're doing classwork or classrooms inside of a project, the Imagine Project 1 or the Imagine Project 2, and HVAC work needs to be done, and that's in the maintenance plan, we would like to marry those two together and do them as an opportunity, which will help the district and reduce the cost once they bid out together. Other items that's been prioritized upon how critical they are. So on an annual basis, we would reprioritize items to make sure that if anything became a fire, we took care of that. Can we please go to the next one? Also, I forgot to mention that this is, keep in mind that this is high level estimates, and a more detailed estimate and more accurate number will come after the design and the bid. Now, this is the current snapshot of our, to be considered as those numbers, but the plan would alter if things was added that wasn't in the plan to begin with. And we're making assumptions that project 2 would be approved beginning in 2025, because if project 2 is not approved, then we'll have a problem, have to redo this plan because the pool conditions remain a concern to us. The pool need repairs, and the repairs have to be minor repairs because of grandfather clause. If we do any major repairs, we may end up having to close the pools down because of grandfather clause limiting us to how much work we could do to them. The plan does not include any health and life safety costs because it's level and it's taken out, it's levied and taken out of a different separate budget. Can you go to the next one? Here we have the detail of everything that's inside of the plan, which Jeff and Fred will go through.
Good evening, everyone. So these are the maintenance plan items that we're going to present to you tonight. The south cafeteria basement is already included in the work at the south cafeteria. The next item is the west tunnel basement floor that's heaving. That has the same conditions underneath the slab of bad soil and the grade level as the cafeteria did itself, and that floor is heaving. We have that included in the work that we're doing in the south cafeteria because we're going to open up one of the walls in the basement and remove that slab at the same time we're doing the excavation. The next item is the masonry prep for the roofing of phase 2 through phase 4. And what that is involved with is the through wall flashing that has to take place in order to install the new roofing. The new roofing requirements require for us to increase the insulation on the roofing. And that means that the existing flashings that are there have to be raised in order to accommodate the new roof. The phase 2 roofing is going to take place on the north end of the building. It's a very complicated area. That includes all the roof drains, mechanical curbs that have to be raised, and the copings that go around the perimeter of the parapet walls. The upgrade of the group bathrooms on the north end of the building. There's 8 of them in total, boys and girls, and that they need to be remodeled. The plumbing behind the walls needs to be replaced, and they are stacked on top of each other, but that's that item. The masonry tuck pointing, this sounds like it's repeating what I just talked about above, but this part of it is actually the tuck pointing of the walls. The facade of the building, how that looks, all of that masonry needs to be re-tuck pointed, resealed in order to keep the water from penetrating through the walls and keep the life of the building going. The west field fence restoration. These fences are black iron fences. They're welded in place. They need to be stripped down, whether it's sandblasting or sanding down, and then they need to be recoated and painted, primed and painted, in order to keep the life of the fence going. The accessibility item with the mag hold opens, this relates to the work that we're doing throughout the building with Project One. The classrooms, in order to make them accessible for the handicapped students, we're going to put mag hold opens, which basically magnetically hold the door open, and they can be released once class started by the teacher. The accessibility survey upgrades revolve around the survey that we did last December with the rest of the building. And these are items that, as you go through the building, that we have a whole survey report on this, but items like there might be a grab bar missing in a bathroom, or it might be the wrong height, the height of toilet paper holders, thresholds where you go through doors, door openings themselves, things like that. The next item is the tennis courts, which we are currently using for parking, and those are slated to be replaced. The south field fenced restoration, that falls in the same category as the west field. It is iron also, and needs to be stripped down and recoated as well. The roof phase of phase 3, that takes place over what we call the 67 addition. That is the 3rd floor roof, and that's about half of that area. And again, that includes the roof drains, mechanical curbs that have to be raised, new copings, that kind of thing. The freight elevator upgrades, we want to upgrade that freight elevator, make it so that it's not a manual operation. It's going to increase the weight. We have to increase the depth of it to make the elevator pit deeper, and we're going to upgrade all the mechanical equipment up above. The roofing for phase 4, that's the second half of the 67 addition, the 3rd floor building. There would be that's the same area, but just half of that area. Roof drains, again, mechanical curbs and copings. The auditorium lighting and little theater house lighting. This is the house lighting, not necessarily the stage lighting, but it's the actual area where everyone sits. That needs to be upgraded, as well as some of the controls in the little theater. And then we have room 412 and room 414. Those were, in the past, computer labs. Those rooms are not slated in the new phase Project One, I should say. And those rooms need to be reconfigured to be a better classroom. From this point on, Fred's going to take the next part of the list and talk about that.
So to round out our current 10-year plan, we have the replacement of the artificial turf in the south field. We do both fields roughly about every 8 years, depending. Sometimes we can stretch it out maybe an extra year depending on how everything holds out. We're looking at the next item, stadium exterior repairs, all the iron work, just like the south field and around the west fields. All the iron gates and the fencing and all that needs, especially at the stadium building, needs some extensive work. We also have, as we're going through the high school itself, we still have to consider the exterior masonry restoration for the stadium building. Also, we're looking at the interior upgrades to the stadium building itself. Nothing has been really upgraded in there in years. Another item on our list is the replacement of the asphalt surface by the auto shop. It's severely cracked and it's not level, and it's a tripping hazard right now. Looking at some additional bathrooms, we're looking at the 1967 edition. That need to be upgraded, just like we talked, just like we're doing at the north end of the building. Some other items, some more plumbing upgrades that need to take place are replacement of water fountains, the drains, and domestic water piping, all the feeder piping in the 1967 edition. Next item would be the football field replacement. We have that slated for around 2026. That needs to be replaced. Also, the mechanical systems. There's about 7 air handlers that are still north of the south hallway, which would still be part of our current plan for the next 10 years. Excluding anything south of that hallway would hopefully be picked up in Project 2. We have also ongoing electrical power distribution upgrades from upgrading panels and feeder cables that are 55 plus years old. We still have additional classrooms and everything that need flooring replacements that we have not got to yet. We also are looking at how we could improve the looks of the building in the corridors to go with more energy efficient lighting. The old wallpaper is well past its useful life. It's peeling and we keep repairing all the seams and everything, but the corridors are in need of some major upgrades. And then one of the final items is, over the years, there's been a lot of complaints about the west fields, the baseball field and the 2 softball fields, in the small football field in between there, the grass areas, how they are sloped for drainage and everything. So that's been an ongoing discussion for several years. So that pretty much rounds out the 10-year maintenance plan.
You go to the next slide. After reviewing that plan, we came up with 3 different scenarios due to the funding that we currently have. So currently we have $4 million a year that's allocated to this budget. The maintenance budget, we want to review the $5 million a year, which would increase the budget by $1 million, and it would help us catch up on some of the deferred items in the past. And also we want to look at a budget that is increasing $6 million a year, which would complete most of the majority of the maintenance projects and the deferred maintenance in the plan identified to this point. Can you go to the next slide? So as the operations team, we came together and we prioritized all of those items that was shown earlier, and we put them broken down by the budget and how many years that it would take to complete those items. So as you can see, the accessibility, which is $1 million from 21 to 22, and it comes out to $545,000 a year. The emergency contingency, which we would have just in case anything goes wrong, or for anything that the contingency would call for a contingency, that would be $218,000 a year at $2.3 million. The masonry prep, that would be at 1.7 during the years of 21 through 23. South cave basement, which is at 3.6, that will be 21. The west tunnel basement floor heaving, that will be during 21 too, so that'll be 218,000. The electrical power distribution upgrade, that'll be during 22 and 23. at $493,000 per year. The freight elevator upgrade, which is 1.4, that will be done in 22. The roofing phase 2 is 1.6, done in 22. The tennis courts done in 22 is 962,000. The upgrade to the bathroom on the north end of the building is 1.5, which will be done over 2 years in 22 and 23 at 776,000. Roofing phase 3 was 3.3. That would be done in 23. The Masonry tuck point and the soffit restorations and repairs, which is 2.2, would be done over from 2024 through 33 at 228,000 per year. The roofing phase, the accessibility survey upgrades, that's 4.3, which will be done over 5 years, 25 through 30, at 726,000. The auditorium lighting would be over 25, year 25, at 436,000. The plumbing upgrades, pipes, drains, and water fountains will be done over 3 years, 25 to 28, at $163,000, 0.5 per year. Replace the asphalt by the auto shop, which is a tripping hazard, at 25, at 245,000 on year 25. Southfield fence restoration, in year 25, that's 136. The Westfield is 136 in the same year. And to remodel classrooms 412 and 414 is year 27 at 218,000. And this will be your $4 million budget. As you can see, if you go to the next slide, these are the things that we had to take out in order to meet that $4 million budget. So as you can see, it's a $20 million shortfall, and things that we had to remove was the bathrooms, the corridor upgrades, the electrical distribution, the flooring, football field replacement, mechanical, stadium exterior masonry, stadium exterior repairs, stadium interior upgrades, turf replacement of the south field, and the west field drainage. Those things were taken out. And keep in mind that this doesn't include the owner soft costs and escalation. These items don't. But the items that's inside of the $4 million budget, that $4 million budget has the soft costs built into it. Can you go to the next? Now, at a $5 million bit, with a $1 million increase and a $5 million maintenance budget, the items in yellow will be taken from the deferred list of that 20 million shortfall and added to this list to increase to 5 million. And the items that will be added is the turf replacement of the south field, the electrical power distribution, the stadium exterior masonry restoration, and the stadium interior upgrades. Can you go to the next slide? These are the items that will be deferred and still left off the list, which will have a shortfall of 12,500,000. And those items are the bathroom steel, the corridor, the flooring, the football field replacement, mechanicals, the stadium exterior repairs, the Westfield upgrades. Can you go to the next slide? At a $6 million a year budget, the items that were added from the $5 million a year budget and the items in yellow will be added to make it so that you have $6 million budget, $6 million a year budget. Stadium exterior repairs will be added in then. The corridor upgrades will be added in at 3.2. And mechanical, 7 air handling units in the south hallway will be added in at 3.2. Can you go to the next slide? All right, now the items that's left off that will be pushed to the next 10-year budget are the 4 items that you see left. The bathroom 1967 edition, which is 2.1 million. The flooring inside of the classrooms, offices, which is a $1.6 million budget. The football field replacement, which is a $795,000 budget. And the Westfield upgrades, the drainage, which is a little bit over $1 million budget. Those are all the items that we have to push over to the next 10-year plan even with the $6 million year budget. Okay, go to the next slide. So we're recommending to increase the budget $6 million a year because realistically, this would help continue the maintenance needs of the district of the 100-year-old building, over 100-year-old building. We would like to reevaluate the impact of the budget increase in light of the other capital projects and determine if we have sufficient funding to keep up and catch up with the deferred maintenance. This also gives us opportunities to show and get questions about all of the items that the board was asking in the last couple of board meetings. Do you have any questions?
Craig, do you have questions?
Oh, you're starting with me. All right. I have a number of thoughts. Back on roll back to slide 2. So you started this presentation with the criteria for maintenance was emergency maintenance, items impacted by construction work, and items which should have been done because the opportunity of construction provides. And now if you go to your $4 million list, if you would please do that. Explain to me how the freight elevator fits that criteria and on the remodeling of 412 and 414 fit that criteria.
Jeff, could you answer that question?
Yeah, the freight elevator, I'm trying to make sure that I'm understanding your question completely.
We laid out a criteria that says we're just going to upgrade. I mean, frankly, we are spending $40+ million on the building, and we're upgrading a ton of stuff, right? But this is in addition to that.
Correct.
And I want to be sure that everything on this list is absolutely critical.
Okay.
And you laid out a criteria for that. So tell me how those things fit that criteria.
Okay. So the freight elevator, that's a great question. And it does, the freight elevator, I think fills a need. The north end of the building needed to have an elevator to let the students access as well. And our thought here is that we're going to use the freight elevator, convert it so that it can be used as a passenger elevator and a freight elevator combined. And that would take care of the north end of the building. And we consequently moved the elevator that was going to go to the north end of the building, and we put one over at the new cafeteria in the library area to fill that need on that side. So we're filling a lot of, I want to say, accessibility issues. At the same time, we're taking care of a very old elevator that needs to be repaired and is breaking down almost every 2 or 3 weeks. So that was that issue. 412 and 414 is on our radar because those are rooms that they can be used as a classroom right now, but they need to be revamped as well to be more useful in the future. So they're not currently on the project 1 list, and we wanted to include them in the list of work that we wanted to have done.
Do they fit the criteria that we talked about?
Well,
if I may jump in. Part of what you're seeing here, Craig, is when we went through this process, we had some money left over. I shouldn't say it that way, but we plugged in some items that were lower cost that we could do. So part of these, for example, you look at that, that's not happening till way at the end of the time frame. So if you look at this plan going out to 2030, it's happening in 2027. So that is space that's not effectively being utilized right now. The actual spacing of that room isn't ideal. They work computer labs. They work really well for that. They're not working well. We put it out there. It wasn't, I think it fits the criteria, but the reality of it is it's so far out, who knows if we'll get to it.
Okay.
Craig, do you mind if I ask a question that follows
Please.
up on what you're asking?
Please go ahead, Ralph.
So I'm a little confused by this too, and I'm really supportive of Craig's line of questioning, Mike. So when we did this kind of stuff at D90, what would happen is the administration would highlight in yellow lines what you call in your PowerPoint emergency maintenance, items that can't wait. You have to do this for safety issues or because the facility item being renovated has gone past its useful life, et cetera. Things you literally had to do. And then we had two other categories. Green were things that really should be done, but we could hold off. They were more optional, but they were important. And blue were things we would just like to do if there's money available. What I don't understand, and where I hope Craig is going, and I don't want to speak for Craig, is I don't understand which one of these are actually emergency maintenance, which ones rise to that level. And I can't tell from looking at this, and I don't know what your prioritization process was. And for me as a board member to evaluate this, I would need to understand those things.
Yeah, that can be easily provided, Ralph. There's no issue with that. I will tell you, between now and 2024, everything on that list falls into that emergency category. Beyond that point, there's much more of judgment being made. I think it all does fit into that category. The process we went through is we evaluated, we had a number of meetings ourselves, including our partners, the architects and the construction managers, and we evaluated the condition of the building and the condition of some of these items, and we did a prioritization among all of us. After that prioritization was done, we took an average of that prioritization, and then we had to look at the costs, and frankly, some of the things of a higher priority just had to get pushed out because we just didn't have the funding to do it. So that's the process we went through. But your, what did you call it? Red, yellow, blue? I can't remember the colors you used. We can certainly take a pass at this list and do that. That's easily done.
I just want to add additionally, as I look at the list, and I know we could have prioritized it better, put it in better order if that's the case. But I too agree that everything that's on here are things that have been put off. And when we talk about preventative maintenance versus repair, some of what you have on here has been put off a really long time. And I think that some of it is trying to get ahead of some things before they do totally just go out on us. We've talked about the HVAC, the ventilator, that. Can't think of the name. Yeah, the air handlers for quite a long time. And, when we talk about COVID, that is an emergency. That's a priority. And so because we've had a list that's growing and growing and growing, this was what we thought would be bringing it forward, would begin to get those things done and chip away at that list so that when we get to the next 10-year cycle, we're in more of a preventative maintenance phase versus a catch-up repairing phase.
Can I ask a question?
If, was Craig finished?
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure. Okay.
I just, Dr. Pruitt-Adams, you said everything has been put off. On this list is $3.6 million, $7 million for the South Cafeteria basement. I don't understand how that has been put off.
That is correct. When I said all, I should have taken that out.
Okay, so I guess my question is that's one, but I have two questions to ask. One is kind of a follow-up to what Craig was asking, but because what elements of this list have come about really as part of Project One? And I'm, when I say that, it means if we aren't doing Project One, they would not exist, to be specific.
I could speak to when I saw the freight elevator, that was identified in Project One, but that was identified to come out of the 10-year maintenance budget, but it was identified in Project One to be converted to a freight elevator that could be used by students on that side of the building. Is that correct, gentlemen?
Yep.
Yes. I want to add in here that this is most of these items on here are very, very important to do. This building is very old. It's not getting any better, and without getting a serious, aggressive plan together to start addressing these items, it's not going to get any better, and the costs are going to go up from here. These items that, like was stated before, like Mike said, when you look at the dates of the year that these are going to take place, when you go all the way through to 2024, those are all critical items, whether Project One was taking place or not.
And one of the things that I would add to that is the roofing, the cost of the roofing is phenomenal, and basically has sucked up all of the maintenance money for the next few years. And we have no choice. I mean, that's not a, well, nice to have or whatever, important to do. It has to be done. So you could do it. We've been doing it piecemeal year after year, and it just gets worse and worse. And the one thing that isn't mentioned, even though not only do the costs go up, but there's actually impact on the program. We've had multiple complaints over the years of areas in the building being flooded, people not being able to do program because water's dripping from the ceiling. So this is not just nice to have. These things have to be done. Now, I'm not going to say every single particular item on this list has to be done, but between the close-in items between now and the next few years, absolutely have to be done.
Sarah, can I ask a question or make a request?
Yes, of course.
So the things what I would really love to see is what things on this list are what you exactly just said, Mike, because some pieces of the football field piece and all of that, like right now, that's not a conversation I'm even willing to entertain in the middle of a pandemic. I want to have a conversation about only what absolutely has to be done and is being impacted, and in what order are those things layered in importance, right? So if we're already in doing the work, which things absolutely have to be done because we're in there, and which must be done because if they don't, we're going to have such a deterioration that it would be dangerous. Like we're needing to know, like, for me, to me, this looks like a big list of a lot of stuff that's added on when we get to those next 2 years. And I would just really like to, when we get to those increased dollar amounts, I'm sorry, from when we go from the 4 million to the 5 to the 6, that I thought that we were getting more clarity about specifics, and I feel like you gave us more broad, and I would really like to see exactly what needs to get done. And to me, this isn't itemized in a way that helps me to understand, oh, well, if we do, because we have this opened up right now, these 3 things, if we did these, this means we're going to save money long-term because we can actually get that done now. I'm not seeing it that way. It's not, and so I would love to see it that way, because right now, it's a tad bit on the frustrating side for me.
I do want to add, though, that I want us to really look at, we were asked a couple of months ago to come forward with the 10-year maintenance plan of all of those things that needed to be done. And so while, yes, we should maybe could prioritize them better, specifically in chronological order, but we brought forward those things that were on the list for 10-year maintenance. Ms. Harris, you spoke of the football field. That's been deferred. That's not even on the list of stuff to do, even if the board granted us the $6 million. And so I do think there's a level of prioritization here. I would agree that this is work that has been put off, that really needs to be done. Even with the classroom, when we talked about rooms 412 and 414, which are down the road at 2027, right now that's classroom space that's not being utilized. And at some point, you know, we want to make that where it can be utilized by our students, because right now it's not. That was one of the things when we talked about the basement having place for storage, because right now we're storing stuff in various classroom spaces. So some of it's about freeing up classroom space for instruction. But you know, as Jeff indicated, and we all know as homeowners, if you don't take care of your house, it'll fall apart. And so we can put this in a prioritized order for the board. I agree that that needs to happen. If the board wants the color code, red, yellow, green, we can do that as well. And maybe that will help answer some of the questions and remove some of the frustration with that. Do you think that would be useful?
That would be super helpful, Dr. Pruitt-Adams. I think where I was feeling frustration is, even though those things say that they've been deferred, when you look at the 5 million and the 6 million plans, there's some of those pieces that looks like they're still in there. I'm not clear. Maybe it's just the way I'm reading it, the way the information is presented. It could be just, it's been a very long day. It could be a number of those things. But looking at it again tonight and hearing the explanation just made me, like if those things are deferred, I don't want to know about those things. I only want to know about what has to get done.
Right.
That's where I'm at.
Right. I think the intent was, this is the big list of what needs to be done. If we have 4 million, this is what we could do, but that leaves this over here. If we have 5 million, we could take some of those things from the list over there and put them here, but then there still leaves some left over. And then if we had the 6 million, we could add a little bit more, but there's still some left over. But I can see how it could be confusing.
I think I'd like to add that I remember the list I think that Tom is talking about with the color coordination, and we can go back to that and we can add that in here relatively easily.
Gina, did you have other questions?
Hey, Sarah?
So this is, Matt, did you have a question? I don't want to jump in if you did.
Yeah, just a real quick, more of a comment / rhetorical question, and that is, realizing that project 1 is now underway, but still has 2-3 years to go, and then project 2 even bigger in scope. I guess my question is, to what degree is this competing with project 2 in terms of dollars? And so I realize there's no answer. It's a matter of priority and try to, but I get, I just want to put that out there that we've deferred things for 50 years, and that's part of what we're seeing here, but that's certainly what we're seeing with the Imagine project. So I'm just trying to make sure that that is raised again as a concern in how to afford all this. And I am confident that the staff, with all due respect, could have given us a $7 and $8 million a year maintenance budget. That's that much of a huge building with needs. And so anyway, I don't know where the line should be drawn. And so, and I would echo some of the other comments in terms of helping prioritize it and really getting at the most urgent and significant. And we can't do everything, at least not even in 10 years necessarily. Thanks.
And don't forget that don't forget that a lot of these items are the NEP items that often get overlooked because they're the items that you cannot see. The people often have a tendency of looking over the roofs or the air handling units and those type of items because you don't see them. The plumbing, those type of things, you don't see them, so it's easy to push those off when they're the heartbeat of in the veins of your building. So I do agree with the color coordinating. The color coordinating. I think it was red, green, and blue that you wanted to see. We'll take back to our meeting and do that. That shouldn't be a problem because we have everything prioritized. It's just the numbers on the left-hand side of the screen was cut off, so that'd be easily done for you.
So I'd like to add something to what Matt's comments were. If you look at this list, we have tried not to go south of the south corridor hallways with a lot of this work. That kind of work is not included in this list. We don't have a roof included in this list over the field house and over those gymnasiums and that on that side. Thinking that project 2 is going to take some of that part of that building away. Mechanical systems are not included over there. Bathroom repairs are not included over there. We're trying to hold off and not intermix that what possibly could be coming for project 2. So I don't know. I hope that answers or helps you see that a little bit clearer, Matt, but we don't have items on this list that are going in that direction.
Thank you, Jeff.
So Sarah, can I make one more comment?
Can we go to Jackie? She hasn't spoken yet.
Go ahead.
Jackie, do you have anything to say about this?
I just I agree with the comments that have been made about something that would be a little easier to look at how things are prioritized. And I appreciate the work, and I am, Ron, your comment about the plumbing and the roof and all those types of things, that's exactly actually where my mind is going. And so I'm viewing this, it's a 10-year, plan, but it's fluid because it may need necessarily, some things may need to be bumped up or, lowered down as we have been doing. But what I'm, I guess, curious about is in the next, 3-4 years, the things that we have there, are we making sure things like plumbing, the roof, I'm thinking air handlers, and probably more so because of a pandemic than I may have in the past. So are we prioritizing things? Does this list reflect our current environment? And then that's one question. And the only other question I had was, I'm looking at tennis courts, and maybe I'm just confused if I thought that was covered under the Imagine budget.
It was listed there, but it's funded from here.
Okay, so if that could be cleared, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, there's actually 2 or 3 items in exactly that. Freight elevators, another one. Those were items that were done as part of, they were bid together with the Imagine project because they were impacted by it, but they were funded out of this budget because we knew we were very short on the Imagine project budget.
Okay, I think that would be helpful to be able to, because clearly, even if maybe it's just me, but I know I've probably asked this question before, so just some clarity would be helpful. But then in terms of like the next 4 or 5 years, does this list in terms of priorities reflect our current environment and things that are not cosmetic as much as they are, crucial to the maintenance?
Yes.
Yes, and we also have to keep in mind that we try to live within the means of the budget. So like the air handling units was $3.2 million. That with a $4 million budget, that would eat up the entire budget. So we had to kick the high ticket items. We had to kick down the road a little bit in order to stay within those budgetary limits.
So let me just say that, because that's where I get confused, is that looking at the budget and how are we doing this? That's when it starts to feel like, let's get a lot of more things done perhaps than the priorities. And that's where I get confused, because I would think that, you know, the roof flooding and the, you know, Mike, you gave that excellent, you know, example of how that impacts not only the building, but programming. So how are we looking at, well, that costs too much, so let's put that off, if it perhaps should be taken care of sooner? And that means that, you know, we don't fix the lighting in the auditorium. I just, you know, I'm just looking at the list. I'm not. Yeah.
That's a totally fair question. And what we actually ended up doing is, in some cases, the way you do that is we broke big projects into chunks. So you can see in a number of these cases, you're not doing them all at once. You're spreading them out over a number of years. Now, some things you can't do that way. The roofing has to be done somewhat, you know, within year after year. But some of those other things we've broken. And for example, the masonry work, you're doing that over a period of 10 years. And frankly, when you're done, you'll probably start over again. It's sort of like painting the Brooklyn Bridge or whatever, one of those bridges. There are things like that on this list. So to your point, that's what's going to have to happen year over year. You're going to have items like, for example, we'll look at the corridors and we're going to say, you know, we just put all these new rooms in and these corridors look terrible, and you know, everything needs to be done. So we probably have to break a portion of that project off and move it forward to deal with that problem opportunistically. So this is not a science by any means, but the idea was to try to give the board some sense of the magnitude of the work and what amount of work could be done with what amount of money. So I think the idea of color coding it would be helpful. This is absolutely prioritized because we basically put in that 4-year plan the absolute necessities. The 5-year plan are the next ups, and the 6-year plans are everything else. So, but I can see how it would be confusing. So we'll do better with color coding.
Okay, and I just want to be clear that I am talking about that aspect of it in terms of the prioritizing, but also are we putting something over a series of years? And I don't, for the air handlers just keep coming back to me, that are we doing something over a series of years that needs to be handled more expediently, given the, you know, the necessity and from a health standpoint? And, you know, it's kind of like whenever you have something go wrong with your house, you know, like we had a huge plumbing issue in our basement. And it's, you know, it's kind of like when people come over, you can't say, oh, come look at the new, you know, $7,000 little pipe that, you know, that we had to have in the wall that we tore out. You want to be able to show people your new deck or your new, you know, but the necessities are what we're talking about. And it may not be, you know, things that, as we're looking at a budget, but is this budget reflecting if we need, you know, the big chunks that need to come out and what that scenario is? And I'm not sure. So I guess that's, from looking, it's unclear.
Thank you. Craig, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just, because I kicked off this conversation and I didn't quite mean to kick it off the way it went, but that's okay. I just wanted to say, you know, I really hate where we are, because I feel like the board gets put in this position all the time where we've made a decision on something, and then we're presented with this list of things that we have to do. And I'm going to be the first to agree that all the things that you come back and say are yellow on this list, they need to be done. It doesn't matter whether it's $4 or $5 or $6 million. Those are things that we need to do and we need to spend on. But where I think we have this backwards is that those $4, $5 or $6 million, that comes first. And then comes program 1 and program 2 and program 3 or whatever. And we have a limited amount of money the community is willing to give us. It's not infinite. We can't keep pushing it. So somewhere we have to say we can't have this. And I guess that's all I'm going to say. And I think that can't have this has to be, I don't care if the Imagine group said we needed to do it. we don't have the money for it. We have to spend it on this. This has to come first.
Can I jump in on that, Sarah? Just to finish up? Yeah, because my question is, the recommendation is to spend $6 million a year. So my question to the administration is, where's the $2 million incremental coming from that the recommendation is, because, and what are the other priorities elsewhere? So where's it coming from? Because we can't do things piecemeal and just say, okay, we need $6 million for this area, and then we've got something else, you know, whether it's staffing or programs or other costs of the district. So the question is, where's it coming from?
Yeah, and I'd like to echo that. So that was what I was going to, almost exactly what I was going to say before, Sarah, when I deferred the floor to Matt. I think what I would appreciate from the administration is proposed cuts in other areas, maybe not to the full 2 million in the first year to get up to the 6 million budget, but something, and possibly, because in my mind, I'm very sympathetic to the point that there's a lot of deferred maintenance and that we've probably underspent on capital improvements and maintenance improvements for decades. So we've got to get up to a rational level of expenditure there. But that just means if we're going to stick within a sound budget, we need to reprioritize some other expenditures and find that 2 million to get up to the 6 million where we should be in capital or maintenance improvements every year. And I'd like to have some suggestions for the administration on how to get there. And since we're making up for a long period of time, my mindset is if for a year or two to get to that 2 million, we have to dip into the reserves to cover the transition period, I would understand that. But at some point, it would have to come out of other current expenditures so that we're not consistently dipping into the reserves to do this. We maybe have a transition period, but the administration comes back and identifies areas of savings to then cover these, I think, very needed maintenance costs.
So I have a question, and I'm not sure, maybe Mr. Pruitt can answer it. What is the replacement value of the building? You gave us that number at a prior, I want to say 300 and something million.
I can't remember if it was, it's something like 370 million. It's based on the square footage of the building. We can get that for you. I don't want to misquote you. I always get stuff wrong, so.
It was somewhere around $375 million.
Yeah, okay, so it's, yeah, we have 1 million square feet, whatever it was, $375 per square foot.
Okay, and then I echo the sentiment around needing to know where this money is going to come from. None of the items that were listed fall under life safety.
No, we left that out of the analysis. We could add it back in. This is confusing enough as it is. The health, life, safety, it's a separate budget. It's levied separately and it's paid for separately. That's why we chose to leave it out.
Yeah, and that's fine. I just wanted to be clear that that's not part of this.
Yeah, it's not. And it's about another 5.1 million.
Okay. So this is up again, the August 27th regular board meeting. And hopefully some of,
first,
yeah, of course.
I'm going to ask a question of the board. In order for the board to approve this item, from what I heard today, I'm just checking for clarification to make sure, because if we can't have the information done, then I would recommend we not bring it back next week. So what I've heard is you need a prioritized list. You need to know what we must have. I'm trying to capture everybody's thoughts, and so I am going to ask the board for a consensus on this, because I don't want to come in next week with what we thought we heard, and that's not what the board needs in order to make an informed decision.
Yeah,
so what I have heard is you'd like to see it prioritized, perhaps color-coded, red, yellow, green. I don't know how we get away from identifying some things as deferred, because the list is a comprehensive list of what needs to be done. And depending on what the board gives us, determines what we can do. And so since our recommendation is for 6 million, then we should come back next week, if possible, with a list, a prioritized list of what 6 million would do with regards to getting the work done within the 10 years, in addition to how we're going to pay for it, or where it's coming from. Is that correct, or am I missing something? Do you want us to come back with the 4, 5, 6, or just the 6?
I would suggest bringing back the 4, 5, and 6, just so that it's not a yes or a no, but there's some flavors there.
Okay, well, if we come back with a 4, 5, 6, then we have to show what's deferred from on each list and what's being added to the list. And then how we pay for it. That has to be done within 2 days in order to do all of that. If the team cannot do it, then I would recommend that we pull it until September.
And I think that's fine. I think it's better to have clarity on these issues than to try to rush to some indeterminate end and then fall short. I think one other thing that I heard as a request was just to signal what is already in Project 1 and what is, because some of these pieces are already part of Project 1, so just kind of highlighting.
They were part of Project 1, but not Project 1 dollars. They were capital campaign dollars, so we could put an asterisk or something like that that says Project 1.
Yeah, because the basement, for example, I mean, that's sort of, I mean, I understand why it's on the list, but my understanding is also that that's already in progress. So I don't know that it's quite the same.
Right, and that's from the capital improvement budget. But like the freight elevator is an example. It was identified in Project 1, but it was coming out of capital campaign dollars. I mean, not capital campaign, capital improvement dollars, as were some other things. I just need to know if we are missing something. So you need to have the prioritized list. You want scenarios, 4 million, 5 million, 6 million. You want identification in their priority, red, yellow, green. And then you want some kind of indication of what is in Project 1 but comes out of capital improvements. And then you want to know how we're going to pay for it. Am I missing anything?
That's what I heard. Anybody else?
Okay, so that's what I've heard. The board needs to make an informed decision. Then I am going to suggest that we bring it back to the September COW, and then maybe ask for approval either in the September regular or the September special. That will give the team time enough to get the information that has been requested.
I think that's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
The next item is the presentation of the tentative budget. And this item is for discussion. Making the presentation is Cindy Sedor, Chief Financial Officer, and Alyssa Alfano. At the conclusion of this presentation, we are going to ask that the budget be brought forward for the August 27th Board of Education meeting. This is the tentative budget presentation. This allows us to post in the newspaper. This item is in compliance with Strategic Plan Priority 4 and District Policy 4:10. Ladies.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pruitt-Adams. So our tentative budget, if when you guys went through it, you can see it looks tremendously like our preliminary budget. The reason that is there's some of the costs that are also in here from, are not included in our budget from COVID. The one thing that we had also was the fact that through Illinois State Board of Education, their recommendation and sort of their guidelines is the fact that you take your COVID expenses and you put them in your on a contingency line. And the reason you're doing that is so you're not building it into your budget. You don't want this to be an annual ongoing basis, but you want to show that these are our one-time expenses that we can later pull out and say, do we need to continue with some of these expenses? So with a little bit of an explanation with that, we'll talk about it a little later too. Can you please go to the next slide? So when we did our budget, the board had recommended us to stay within our CPI allowance of 1.9% over the prior year's budgeted expenditures. Our expenditure increase for this year, just when we did our regular budget, was 1.8%. Next slide, please.
Before we go through and show you the actual revenue numbers, I just want to give you an overview of what you're looking at. So it's really going to be similar to the preliminary budget we presented last month. Our TIF surplus is gone. Our last payment was received in FY20. We are going to have a decrease in our corporate personal property replacement tax. We are budgeting approximately a 20% decrease, which is exactly what we saw during the Great Recession. We are expecting a flat evidence-based funding. That's what the state tells us. We're going to see a decrease in interest rates. We do invest out, so we're going to see a slightly lower decrease than what you would think with what the rates are right now, because we do tend to keep our investments out 1 to 2 years. So some of this is going to hit us harder in the following year. We're expecting flat federal and state grants. We are expecting money coming in from FEMA and our CARES Act. I'll go through that in a little bit as well. And we're also going to expect lower real estate tax collections.
Next slide. So as I said earlier, our overall expenditures increase within the CPI of 1.8% for this year. The anomaly that we had seen was the capital and non-capital equipment. It decreased by 37%. That is because we did a lot of reclassing throughout this year, and also for the fact that the board did, they changed the threshold, the board approved to 5,000 from 500. So we did reclass throughout the year, so that's why we had the decrease of 37%. Our construction paid from fund balance is going to be from Project 1, and also the life safety, and also the 10-year maintenance. Next slide, please.
So the actual COVID-19 revenue impact on the budget, we are expecting a lower real estate tax collections. As I said before, we're estimating 97.5%. We're going to see lower interest rates. We're going to have flat evidence-based funding, federal and state grants, lower corporate personal property replacement tax collections. We are expecting $50,000 of FEMA grant money, and this figure could change for the adopted budget. This is just what we have in our budget right now for the tentative. And then we're also receiving $171,000 in CARES Act, but we do have to share that money. So $81,000 is going to Fenwick and Trinity. So it's not all ours. Next slide, please.
So we're estimating at least a $2 million increase for PPE, the cleaning, and additional FTE. So far, we have spent $700,000 at this point. As Alyssa pointed out, some of it will be covered by the CARES Act, and some of it will be covered by FEMA. As we know that, we will put in slides to show where our monies will be coming from. As I stated earlier, we will add this as a contingency to the budget, so it's not in anybody's actual budgets for next year. Some of the grant money will offset some of these costs. Potential costs to consider, IHSA, they changed, and they didn't cancel the sports, they sort of shifted it on seasons. So we have some of the expenditures we're not still sure of if this sport does get to be played in the spring. Some of the future ISB, Illinois State Board of Education decisions or rules and regulations they'll have, and also to what will happen with the second semester learning plan, whether it'll be remote, hybrid, or in person. as a district, we are continuously always speaking about, what's the impact it's going to have on our finances and the potential. We may have the potential to amend our budget in the spring. Next slide, please.
So as you can see from our historical look back of our revenues, our preliminary budget and our tentative budget are nearly identical. The only thing we added in was the $500,000 of FEMA grant money, which is the red line. Everything else is still identical to what we presented last month. Next slide, please. Our split in our percentages are identical as well. So there's no major changes from what we're presenting tonight in revenues.
So for our tentative budgeted expenditures, we have not changed anything in here either, except we did add COVID as a contingency to the bottom line. We put it in the tentative budget as the $2 million, as we had stated earlier. We think that's probably what the spend will be. We just are, again, not building this into budgets because this should not be an ongoing expenditure that we see year after year for some of the items that we've had to purchase. Next slide, please. This is also a chart sort of nice to see in a percentage, not just dollar amounts. It's nicer to see it in a chart to see what the percentage is. As we can see, a good portion of all of our expenditures are spent on employees, which is salaries and benefits. Next slide, please.
So this is our 5-year projection. Our tentative budget numbers have not changed on this portion of the projection. Besides, we increased our federal revenue by $500,000 for the FEMA grant. Just to kind of remind everybody, there has been no changes in our assumptions from when our CFAC reviewed this last fall and winter, besides the real estate tax collection rate. So we did lower it to 97.5% since we are in a pandemic. Beyond this is a fluid projection, so as we get more information, this will be updated. But for now, it's going to look almost identical to what you saw before. And if we go to the next slide, this is very identical as well, but we did increase the additional 10-year maintenance capital coming from fund balance. And I know there hasn't been a decision made, so as decisions are made or there's internal discussion about how much we can handle, we will update these numbers as well. And we did add a line for the COVID contingency.
Next slide. These are some of the items, potential additional expenditures that we've had related to COVID. Again, we are keeping a spreadsheet that lists all of the expenditures that we actually have. And then we also have a list that's also showing what we're receiving from CARES and also from FEMA. The one thing that I wanted to point out too is the fact that this is a tentative budget that can be changed before we do the adopted budget. So depending on where some of the numbers come from, these numbers can definitely be changed by the time we come back and present the adopted budget. We've also been talking to 97 and seeing where they are with their numbers and really seeing if we're on the same page where we're thinking about where transportation will be, where we think our revenues will be, to make sure that we're actually on the same page with understanding where we think things should be. Next slide, please. This is just a timeline. As we said, as Dr. Pruitt-Adams had said, that we need to have the tentative budget in order to display it for 30 days and also put it in the paper. And then we come back for the adopted budget in September. Next slide, please. Any questions?
Do we have any board member questions or comments? I'm going to take that as a no. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item is the resolution for authorizing preparation, placement of inspection of the publication of the 2021 tentative budget. This item is going to be recommended as an action item following this meeting. So at the conclusion of the presentation, we are asking that authorizing the preparation, placement for inspection and publication the fiscal year 2021 budget move forward to the Board of Education for approval at a special board meeting later this evening on August the 18th. Again, making this presentation is Cindy Sidor and Alyssa Alfano. And this item is in compliance with Strategic Plan Priority 4 and Board Policy 4:10. Ladies.
Thank you again, Dr. Pruitt. The resolution needs to be, we need to have the resolution signed so we can go ahead and post in the paper and also put on display for 30 days before we bring back the budget so it can be adopted in, board adopted in September. So this is basically what we see as the budget now. But again, too, as I pointed out, between the tentative and the adopted budget, there can be changes. So if there's changes that are going to be made to it, we will definitely get those in and present that to the board when we come back in September. Any questions?
I assume there are no questions from anyone.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Sidor.
Thank you. That completes all of our items under finance. So now we move to the instruction section. And our first item is the 2020-2021 new hire demographics. This is informational. Making the presentation is Dr. Roxana Sanders, Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources. This item is in compliance with Strategic Plan Priority 3, Board Goal 1, and District Policy 5:10. Dr. Sanders.
Thank you, Dr. Pruitt-Adams. Each year we present to the board the report on demographics of our new hires. This year, we don't have a lot of new hires. The total is 14 in all employee categories. We have 3 administrators, 9 faculty members, 1 non-affiliate employee, and 1 classified personnel member. So the breakdown is that 64% of all our new hires and 66% of faculty new hires are people of color. For comparison, last year, we hired 50 new employees, and minorities represented 54% of all new hires and 37.5% of faculty new hires. So I'm happy to answer any question that the board might have.
Any questions?
Just where do we stand now on percentage of overall employees from a minority versus white standpoint and from a faculty? Do we know just the total numbers?
We do. We have about 40% of all our employees are minorities, and for faculty, it's 26%.
Anybody else? Looks like Ralph maybe got disconnected. Okay, well, thank you very much, Dr. Sanders.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item is the presentation of the Alternative Learning Opportunities ALOP grant renewal. This item is for discussion. Making the presentation is Dr. Lloyd Fiorenza, Director of Student Learning, and Greg Johnson, Associate Superintendent. At the conclusion, the attached IDEA will be brought to the board for approval. The special Board of Education meeting following this meeting. This item is in compliance with Strategic Plan Priority 2 and District Policy 6:110.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. I just want to introduce this item by saying that we've had the Alternative Learning Opportunities Program now for a few years at OPRF, and the board has seen us discuss it before. We even referenced this a little bit during the MTSS presentation that Dr. Fiorenza and others presented a few months ago. So in line with that presentation, as you're taking a look at this new IGA, what we want to do here is just simply highlight the significant change from previous years in terms of the implementation of this past year. And that is that essentially we were able to double our employees. Dr. Fiorenza met with the folks over at West 40 who govern the ALAP grant. She can cast a name in a moment, I'm sure.
Renee Marcus.
There we go. And was able to find a way to expand this grant a little bit, which allows us to do two things: double the personnel in our building to support our students, and then double the benefits for our students, meaning the number of students we're working with and all the benefits that come with that, credit and so on and so forth. And so I don't know if you have anything else you want to add, Dr. Fiorenza, but I think other than that, we can open up for questions.
The only thing I want to add is, as you look at the data that came back from the ALAP grant this year, we have only had Amy Ferguson and Jermaine Walker, who are the two individuals from West 40 that serve in this program, specifically with our high-risk students. They've only been a part of Oak Park since around November 15th. So this data, which is remarkable, really consists of in person from November until we left in March, which I think is just phenomenal that they were able to accomplish what they were with our students in that short a time. So we're looking forward to having them back. That's all.
Thank you. Any questions? No? All right. Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Next item is the executive functioning skills support tutors position. This item is for discussion. Making the presentation is Mr. Greg Johnson, Associate Superintendent, Roxana Sanders, Dr. Roxana Sanders, Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources, and Dr. Lloyd Fiorenza, Director of Student Learning. At the conclusion, the next steps are that this item is currently presented for discussion with the recommendation to move it forward for approval at the August 27th Board of Education meeting. This item is in compliance with Strategic Plan Priority 2 for Goal 1 and District Policy 6:65.
Okay, to introduce this item, I just simply want to illustrate that, again, back when we did the MTSS presentation several months ago, we talked about the need for really a tier 2 support structure for executive functioning for our students. We realized that wasn't really in place the way we needed it. And so we announced that we wanted to find some way to provide for this need in the coming years. There were a few different ways that we looked at for doing that, but now things have shifted, of course. We're in a remote environment, and we feel at this exact moment the need is chronic, and we don't want to wait for another kind of cycle to try to get somebody on board to help support this program. We want to do it right now, if at all possible, which is why we're bringing it to the board at this time of year. I know that Dr. Fiorenza can certainly talk a little bit more about exactly what this structure will look like and what this person would be doing with our students as far as tutoring is concerned. And as far as the budget is concerned, I believe that Dr. Sanders wants to speak to that as well, a little bit as well as far as the cost. But with that, I'll pass it over and eventually open it up to questions.
So just a little background again about this executive functioning study skills position. This is a tier 2 intervention. So currently in our building, we have tier 1 intervention, which is open to everybody. It is flexible. Students can come and go as they choose. And that is before and after school tutoring, specifically for executive functioning. We have a couple of people that do that for an hour before and about an hour and a half after school. And then we have a tier 3 intervention, which is small group, intensive. Students are typically assigned to there for a year. It's data-based. What we were lacking that we noticed as we did our building-wide MTSS evaluation is that we were missing the tier 2 spot. So we caught some of the students, right, in our tier 1 that could self-advocate, that knew they needed some support or had a family member that directed them there. Or we waited until the problem was so significant that it was significantly impacting their academic success in the school, evidenced by things like failing multiple classes, very disorganized, not self-advocating, and some of those SEL issues like relating to peers, just a lot of those things. So in developing a clear MTSS system, we really need to get something at that tier 2 level, which will help our students focus with the guidance of a tutor on a consistent basis over the course of 6 to 8 weeks on those executive functioning skills such as homework completion, time management, prioritization, self-advocacy, and then instead of just dropping in, they're going to be involved in a personalized plan that helps them transition out of the support. So it's not just going to end, it's going to be a nice smooth transition. And then if that isn't working, then they would move to the tier 3 support. But without that step 2, we just really don't have the flexible service delivery model that we really should have for our students. We have probably 300 to 400, and that is not an exaggeration. One of the counselors shared that with me this week, requests for executive functioning support on an ongoing basis. Parents over the summer have personally emailed me asking how we will do that, when it will be available, could their student come in from their study hall. As we know, specifically with remote learning before school, it's going to be a challenge to get kids out of their bed. Not that they won't, but especially if it's a student that struggles with executive functioning, that is going to be a very difficult thing. And specifically, remote learning is going to exacerbate some of these challenges with executive functioning for some of our kids. And so by having this position, we are able to serve significantly more students in that tier 2 realm. And my hope is increase the level of success of students and decrease the number of students that will absolutely need a tier 3 intervention.
And if I just may add about funding for this position, I know that's always an important question when we ask the board to consider adding an additional position. The question was partially answered through the questions that were sent from the board. I believe the answer was given that the difference is it's salaried and the regular tutor position is paid per hourly. So really the only difference between what regular tutors are paid and this position is the benefit package. It's still, the salary amount was arrived at by taking $30 per hour amount and just multiplying it by 7 hours a day and 183 work days, which that position will need to be available for student support. And typically we present new positions as part of the staffing plan. The need for it was really highlighted during the remote learning plan, as was already explained by Dr. Fiorenza and Mr. Johnson. This year, we will have reduced cost for substitute teachers because we will be using very few substitutes. We are not going to have teachers going outside for professional development during the first semester. We will not have any field trips for the first semester. And then we will also look at other positions that we may not need. So while we don't have the exact place of the budget that it will be long-term determined yet, but we promise that this will be considered as part of staffing for next school year.
Questions?
Sarah, can I kick in?
Sure.
I just want to tell the board that tier 2 interventionists have one of the highest effect size under the evidence-based model for enhancing student achievement. So the statistically meaningful correlation between having a tier 2 interventionist or more on board and improving student achievement, especially for student populations that have struggled with the gap, is very, very, very high. So this is an evidence-based practice. This is the best practice.
Thank you, Ralph. Questions from anyone else or comments? Jackie? Becky, then
yeah,
Craig.
I'm sorry, Craig, I can't see. Okay. The question I have is, I, concur with what Ralph said, and the question I have is, given the large number of students that have been identified as needing this support, how is one employee going to handle that? It just feels like we're setting one person up for failure, or we're setting up, and the, having this identified person and such a great need that we're either going to have waiting lists or something. So I'm not quite clear how we arrived at this position being able to, one position being able to fulfill this need.
So if you remember from the presentation, we're scaling up our tier 3. So we took AE and actually increased it by adding another individual. So a teacher that was already in our building is going to be taking 4 of the mentor study classes. So that's tier 3. What would have been AE is now called mentor study. So I have one teacher taking 4, the other teacher taking 3. Whereas in the past, we did not have that many. So we've increased our tier 3. We are increasing our tier 1. So we have individuals in the building that due to the situation currently needed to be reassigned. They were still working in the tutoring center, but needed to be utilized in a different fashion. And so they will be functioning as executive functioning tutors throughout the day. So I will have 3 individuals doing that. So now we have before and after school EF tutoring, and we have all day 3 individuals, 5 periods a day, able to dedicate to executive functioning. So my hope is, and our estimation at this point, is that by increasing both on the outside, that what we have to work with on the tier 2 level will be 6 periods. Is it going to be absolutely sufficient? No, we will likely need to have a waiting list. But remember, it's a 6 to 8 week intervention. So kids aren't going to sit in there for the entire school year. It's going to be 6 to 8 weeks. We're going to be moving them intensely and intentionally through the intervention. At the end of 6 to 8 weeks, if that hasn't worked, they may need to move to the tier 3 intervention. So at this point, I can't come to the board and say, I'd like 3 or 4 of those positions, although that would be great. And I could likely find enough students to fill that. Right now, I think it's best to start to gather more data about exactly how many kids are served in just the tier 1. How many kids, once we get them through tier 2, are served enough to be gradually released, and how many from tier 2 have to go to tier 3. So from that perspective, I'm just looking to gather that data and that information. We did go to 2 other schools that utilize this same exact position just to kind of get comparables. And both of those schools use 1 position as well.
So I want to make sure I understand what you, in terms of the tutors that, or folks that have been identified that have either been in the tutoring center or have been identified as tutors, their role in terms of executive function support is the same as is for this new position?
No, they are tier 1. So they will be offering what the before and after school tier 1 tutors offer, but throughout the day. So if a student can't get there at 7 in the morning, but can come during their lunch period,
okay,
we're going to have tutors available to do tier 1.
Right. So that's still, so other schools have said that one person working with 300 students has, and you said a 6 to 8 week program, so I don't know how many at a time, but, or how they'll be identified as those, from a position of most need being identified first. So I guess I'm still confused as to how it's best practices if we're not able to handle the need.
So when I explained we have about 300 to 400 students requesting executive functioning tutoring, I'm not saying 300 to 400 students in need of tier 2. I'm saying we have 300 to 400 students that counselors are saying they are getting calls from families, from students, from parents, requesting executive functioning tutoring. So I'm saying by bolstering our tier 1, by increasing the number of people that can provide that tier 1, I'm hoping to curb the number of students that need tier 2 to a manageable number. And then as they filter through there in the 6 to 8 week rotation, I'm hoping that the data shows that tier 2 interventions do close gaps, that they won't make it to tier 3. So of those 300 to 400, I don't know exactly how many are going to need a tier 2. I can't speak to that exact number right now.
Do you have any estimation of what it could be?
So when we sat down with the individual that did the tier 3 intervention last year, of her class load that she had, she was indicating that probably a good 2/3 of her class was only the tier 3 need. So 1/3 of each of her classes needed tier 2. I think that's a pretty large number of kids that were sitting in a tier 3 intervention that could have been served in a tier 2 intervention, gradually released so that more kids who need tier 3 are getting what they need as well.
Okay, I'm sorry, I just have one last question and it's based on what I'm hearing. So then I'll stop. So Lori, so what you're saying then is that we've increased our tier 3 support, but we also found that 1/3 of each of those tier 3 classes needed less than a tier 3 support.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. And we didn't have a place for them to go, so they had to stay in the tier 3. When you have no place.
Yeah,
I'm
but
sorry.
what I'm asking, no, my question, I'm just confused in terms of we've increased with tier 3, but it sounds like the need for tier 3, we've overestimated. And what we really need is tier 2, but we still have the same personnel for tier 3.
So what I'm suggesting is that we have kids sitting in tier 3 that have been there for a semester, 2 semesters, some of these kids 3 semesters. Part of the problem is you don't have a tier 2. Because you don't have a tier 2, you are serving a range of students with really diverse intervention needs. So you can't really focus on the kids that need tier 3 to move them along, because you have kids that really just need 6 to 8 weeks. So you really, in order for there to be an MTSS system that is truly an MTS system, you have to have three layers. You have to layer the support. So really the way it is it starts back at that wheel I showed you. When kids are struggling with executive functioning, they should get that tutoring. They should get the quick, come in before or after school, come in during my study hall, get some support. Let's see if that works. I'm touching base with you. If that's not working, you should logically move to the next level of intervention, which is the tier 2, which is small groups, 6 to 8 weeks, a little more intensive, still flexible, that case management, and then the gradual release. Then if that doesn't work, then you should move to the tier 3 intervention, where it is, again, much smaller, longer, much more intense, case management, social work, a myriad of services, in addition to everything else the rest of the building is doing. However, at Oak Park, what happens is I struggle with tutoring or with executive functioning. I go to the tutoring center, which is only offered before or after school. If that doesn't work, I immediately have to come out of a class and go into academic enrichment, which took me away from one of my classes. Work depends on whether I'm really a tier 2 or I was a tier 3. And now the teacher has 2 kinds of kids with 2 very different needs. And really neither of them are being serviced in the appropriate fashion without a tier 2 intervention in place.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Questions from anybody else? Craig?
Yeah, just a quick follow-up, because that was the gist of what I wanted to ask. You've talked about having some resources that you can potentially redeploy. When you redeploy them, are you redeploying them to tier 1 or tier 3?
Tier 1.
Tier 1. And what kind of skill base is required for tier 1? And is it just a basic teaching certificate, or is there something special?
Not all of our tutors have a teaching certificate. The person that did this before, Veronica Muncie, I don't believe she was a certified teacher. She was through West 40. Rush Neuro, the Rush Neuro facility, they have executive functioning training that all of our individuals have gone through. And so by going through that basic training, you can support kids with some general executive functioning, general time management. That tier 1 is really, it's just the basics. It's just, how can I help you clean out your book bag and get organized? How can I give you a system by which you know where things are? How can I help you organize your notes, prioritize what you should do as homework? As you move up through the tiers, it requires more expertise. It requires more intentionality and really knowing your craft. And so the person that we would be looking for to fill a tier 2 intervention would hold a substitute license, so would be more refined, if you will, with executive functioning, with case management, with really helping students in that intentional fashion navigate school.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Gina, Matt, or Tom? No?
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Then that concludes our items under instruction. And now we're into policies for first read. These items are from Sarah Dixon Spivey, our board president, Ralph Mortieri, board member, myself, Dr. Adams, superintendent, and Dr. Roxana Sanders, assistant superintendent for human resources. I will go through them quickly. If you have any questions, feel free to stop me. So the first one is policy 7:40, which is non-public school students, including parochial homeschool students. And this is just for a 5-year review. Okay. The next one is.
Joylyn, excuse me, when you look over at your other computer where you're dropping your mic.
I'm sorry, I have 2 screens going in order to be able to see what's going. So I move it this way that you may not see my face, because I move the mic part closer.
Okay.
Okay.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay. Then the next one is 5:20, and it is terms and conditions of employment. And this is just a legal reference that was updated in October of 2019. And in addition to that, it's just amended with regards to Governor Pritzker's executive order. Oh, that was the wrong one, I'm sorry. The next one is policy 2:220, board meeting procedures. And that is what was updated with regards to Governor Pritzker's, the pandemic and his response to that. Okay. The next one is 5:30, hiring process and criteria. This was updated to incorporate changes that were made back in October of 2019, as well as to incorporate changes made to the Equal Pay Act of 2003 that was amended, that indicates if an employer violates the subsection, the employer may recover in a civil action any damages incurred, the employee, may recover in a civil action any damages incurred, special damages up to $10,000, injunction release, and costs and reasonable attorney fees. The next one is 5:90, abused and neglected child reporting. This is updated in response to the district employees and teachers amended, changes made in October 2019. It is also updated in response to the Abused and Neglected Child Reporting Act that was amended. We did consult our board attorney about these changes. Any questions on that? The next one is 5:100, staff development. This is in response to the Title IX regulations that were changed in August of 2020. There were some additional
Dr. Pruitt-Adams, I can't hear you, I'm afraid.
And I have it turned right at my speaker.
There, that's better.
My speaker was somewhere else. Okay, is that better? That's
yes,
better.
Thank you.
Okay, the staff development one was changed in response to Title IX regulations that go into effect this month. Now, I was saying there are some additional Title IX policies that we did not include because there were being made changes. The changes are being made based upon our dialogue with our legal counsel. The next one is 6:280, grading and promotion. This is starting in 2019, the PARC test is no longer used in Illinois, and so this is correcting that. And this is from March of 2020 when those changes were made. The next one is 7:340, student records, and that was updated per the law. The next one is 7:70, attendance and truancy, which has been amended, provides that beginning on the 15th day before primary, general, or special election, on the day of any such election, any student who is eligible to vote is entitled to 2 hours during the school day to go vote. The next one is 8:10, connections with the community. This is updated in response to a 5-year review with only minor changes. And those minor changes are aligned with social media. The next one is 8:30, visitors to and conduct on school property. This is updated in response to the Illinois Educational Labor Relations Act, requiring districts to allow union representatives to meet with employees during the workday for certain reasons without loss of pay or leave time. The next one is 280-E, exhibit Illinois Association of School Boards Code of Conduct for members of the school board, and this is up for 5-year review. The next one is 2:220E1, board treatment of closed meeting verbatim procedures. And this is it just speaks about the preparation and storage of verbatim recordings and closed session meetings may be delegated to anyone, a record secretary, administrative official of the board, or other elected board members. The next one is 2:220, Exhibit 2, motion to adjourn closed meetings. This is updated in response to the Open Meetings Act that was amended in October 2019. The next one is 2:220, Exhibit 4, open meetings. And this one had some required inclusions that were listed for board meeting dates and times. Board members recorded are either physically present, remotely present, or absent a summary of discussion on all matters proposed, deliberated, or decided, and recorded at any vote time taken on all matters requiring a roll call vote. Record who voted yay and nay. If a meeting is adjourned on another date, the date and place of the adjournment of the meeting. And when a vote is taken to hold a closed session, the vote of each member and the reason for the closed session with the citation to a specific exception authorizing the closed meeting. And this was updated to be implemented at the Local Government Travel Expense Control Act. And the last one is 2:220 Exhibit 5, Semi-Annual Review of Closed Session Minutes. And this was updated in response to PA 99-515. And the recommendation is to approve these items for first read at the regular board meeting on August 27th. Are there any questions? If not, that concludes all of our items for town meeting.
Thank you. Our next item is future agenda items.
Yes, there are two items I would like to entertain a discussion with the board on. One is the change in the cow date. We've had a request, and I know that there was some dialogue about timing with the board with regards to time between the cow meeting and the regular board meeting, and when the board receives the agenda items for cow, and then a short turnaround for questions to be given to us, and then the follow-up with the same thing with 2 days to make those changes in order to be prepared for the regular board meeting, and then just based on various schedules. And so we reached out to, as an administrative team, we discussed the options of being able to change those meetings. Because the board approves the regular Board of Education meetings in the spring, we cannot change the board meetings, which are currently scheduled for the 4th Thursday of the month. But we do have the latitude to make a decision to change the committee of the whole meetings. And so we are recommending or want to have a discussion with the board to change the COW meetings to the 2nd Thursday of the month. Right now, the community council meets on that day, but in our recent Associate Superintendent Johnson and my meeting with the co-chairs of the community council, they are willing to move their meetings to the 1st Thursday. By doing so, this will allow us to have the COW meeting on the 2nd Thursday, and then that would give us at least another week and a half before we had to have an agenda meeting to get the board the information for the regular meeting. There'll be a 2-week span between the meetings. So we wanted to open that up for discussion. We were asked to look into that. That's what we've come up with. Other than that, there are so many other meetings on Tuesdays and Wednesdays that we know that would not work. So this was the best opportunity that we came up with.
Comments or questions from anyone?
Yeah, are we discussing this now, or are we talking about
Yes,
it? You said future.
Well, we put it under there for future because we would want to take this and put it in place in September. And so that's why we made it future, because it would be for the September meeting. However, if the board would like to think about it and have the follow-up discussion at the regular board meeting, but I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, can I just comment real quick, sir?
Sure.
I really appreciate the amount of time that it gives in between for the information to get back to us, and for you all to have to process and do the work that's required in between based on the requests that we make. So I actually really like the idea of that change, and I appreciate the fact that it would need to be a Thursday based on the other meetings. So I'm supportive of it, but I don't know. I think that's just where I'm at. So.
If there's discussion in favor, then we would bring it back as an item for approval next week.
I also think the sooner, if we're doing this, the sooner we do it, the better, because schedules for people are challenging.
Absolutely.
People being me.
I think
Any of-
bringing it back next week would be enough time to do both things, to think about it as well as not lose time in terms of scheduling.
And if I could, just in that interim period, ask board members to ensure that our collective schedules would allow for this. Doesn't do us much good if we have the administration make a change that we can't all also comply with.
Okay, we'll bring, I see Tom did a thumbs up. So we'll bring it back next week to see where the board, and what Gail will do is we will have her send out dates so that people can look at their calendars. Okay. We did check, that was the only board level committee, the community of the whole, that met on that night. And as I said, they were willing to move. Thank you. The other, I have one more. The
Yes,
other
please.
thing.
No, go ahead.
The other item I would like for us to decide is board member Spivey and I talked about the board's most recent conversation with a representative from IASB, and whether or not the board wants to continue that conversation with them. We have to have a conversation in a public meeting in order to decide to go again with IASB. And so we are asking, I'm saying we, board members, President Spivey and I, are asking that this be a future agenda item for next week.
I'm seeing nods. Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, those were my two.
Any board members have suggestions? Matt, I believe you do. Do you not?
What, regarding future agenda items? Well, it was more just trying to make sure that we could keep track of them all and just, you know, as a board. So whatever way to communicate that on an ongoing basis would be helpful.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
We do have a list as an executive cabinet, and we try to tick them off. Would it be helpful to the board that when we are presenting something that was recommended as a future agenda item, that we note that this was a future agenda item from the board?
Yes,
Yeah.
I think that would be helpful.
And maybe if possible to indicate when it was initially suggested, just because because sometimes I know it takes a while for things to come up just based on where it falls in the cycle. So if that's possible, that would be helpful to me to ring my bell.
Okay.
Thank you.
And we did stop bringing, when we hit COVID, we kind of backed off on that, because as you know, we were bringing so many different items forward over the summer, and the meetings were getting pretty long. But once we get school up and fully running, we can begin to note that.
Okay, any other suggested future agenda items?
Sarah, this is Ralph. Just the one I chatted with you about earlier today. You know, before year end, I'd like to see, after a discussion with Dr. Pruitt-Adams, the rubric set in place for measuring, closing the gaps in achievement.
Dr. Pruitt-Adams, do you need any more clarity?
Could you just say it one more time?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, before the year end, so before the end of calendar year 2020, I would like to have the consideration at the board level of establishing the rubric to measure the closing of the achievement and other gaps that we have by race, ethnicity, et cetera.
Okay.
Anybody else? I also have a suggested future board item, and that would be to invite the Imagine Fund to come and update us as to their work so far. It's been a little over a year since we sort of baptized that group.
You are right. I forgot that one. Our hope is to try to do that in September.
Sounds good. Thank you. Anyone else? All right. I move that we adjourn committee of the whole. We do, of course, have another meeting right after this, but I think we should take a break in between. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?